Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for making yourself available to participate in today's webinar for Summit Minerals, ASX code SUM. Shortly, I'll introduce Summit Minerals Managing Director Jonathan King, who will discuss the company's Stallion Rare Earth Project drilling results, next steps, and Summit's Antimony and Lithium projects. Before I do, however, I would like to remind everyone that following the presentation, Jonathan will be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. So get them ready during the presentation, submit them via the Q&A button on the screen, and we will get them to Jonathan as soon as the presentation completes. So let's get started. I would like to introduce now formally Summit Minerals Managing Director Jonathan King, who will be providing an overview of the company and its plans for the future. Jonathan, over to you.
Good one. Thank you, David. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the presentation. I'd like to thank David from Chapter 1 and Ruben and Stuart from Market Open for making this opportunity open to me. So I thought today, given the interest in the release that we put out last Thursday on the drilling results from Stallion, that we would pull together a quick presentation and try and explain things from the perspective of the company and let you see the way that we're thinking, and hopefully your thinking will align with ours and you'll see some encouragement in the drilling results. So I'm just going to very quickly give an overview of the company. Won't worry about the disclaimer. This is where we sit. Obviously, Summit is in the battery space. We are looking for lithium, rare earth elements, and antimony. This is the current capital structure of the company. So as you can see, we've got a bit of cash on hand and our top 20 remain fairly firm at 52%. So things are pretty good for the company. A breakdown of our projects. We have our antimony projects primarily on the East Coast at Magwood and Windfall, and we'll discuss these towards the end of the presentation. Our lithium projects in Phillips River, which is near Mount Catlin. We have Bridgetown, which is near Greenbushes, and we have the northern lithium projects, but in particular, the Morrissey project here, which is near Red Dirt's developing Melinda lithium project. The one of principal discussion today is Stallion, which is our rare earth project, and it's where we had those quite interesting drilling results. So coming into Stallion, really, the first exercise was just a proof of concept. What we knew was that Manhattan Corporation had in 2009, 2010, drilled some interesting rare earth numbers. Those rare earth numbers were based primarily on cerium, lanthanum, scandium, and yttrium. So there was really only the 4 of the 17 rare earth elements analysed. And we wanted to know, what would we get if we saw the balance of the rare earth elements analysed? That was one point. The other was we also observed that the enrichment was primarily in the granite basement. So if it was primarily in the granite basement, as we can see here, where there's a number of red intersections, which are spread across the bottom of the channel, it suggested that there was more widespread rare earth mineralisation. So we wanted to get in there and have a look at that. So the objectives of the drilling program were to confirm the total rare earth oxides. We wanted to confirm the nature of the granite host, and we wanted to validate the historical drilling results because we knew that there was a fairly substantial drilling database available to us, which had rare earth element oxides present. So, and we thought that that could open up the ground. So let's look at the setting of this thing. What you're looking at on the left there is a digital terrain model. You can see Ponton Creek running down pretty much the guts of the tenements. You can see as the red dots, our drilling as just complete and reported on last week. And if we look to the diagram on the right, you can see the context of the historical drilling by Manhattan Corporation. So the key thing to point out here is that in the northern tenement, the much larger tenement, you can see that there is a highland on the west side of the creek and a highland on the east side of the creek. Now, that's no surprise to anyone who works in these landscapes. You know, you have a creek that often divides upland areas, and that's the case here. Perhaps the more interesting thing is, if we look at the image on the right, we start to see, this is a ternary radiometric image. So essentially uranium, thorium, potassium are roughly in equal abundance. And where they are in roughly equal abundance, the color is white. So where we see white, we are essentially seeing outcrop. So if we look at the drilling with respect to the areas of white, you can see that there are a number of white areas which are coming towards the paleo channel. So in other words, we know we're in a paleo channel and we have thick cover, but as we move to the west or to the east, those covers are going to thin right out. So what does that do to the rare earths? Let's have a look. Here are our drilling results. As you can see, we've got a number of significant results which we reported on last week. 17 meters at almost 4,000 ppm trio, 15 meters at 3,000 ppm trio. These numbers for this style of mineralization are very significant. And I'll come back to this issue later. The other thing that I really want to draw your attention to is the scale that we're looking at here. So we've got numbers such as in hole number 6, 17 meters at over 1,000 ppm trio on the east side of the creek, and 2 kilometers away on the west side, we've got 13 meters at 3,500 ppm trio. So in the south, we have hole 4, 22 meters at 953 ppm trio, and in the north, 1.25 kilometers away, we have 9 meters at 555 ppm trio. So the scale appears to be huge, and at this point in time, the scale determinant is the extent of the drilling. So this area remains significantly under-drilled at this point in time, and there is certainly opportunity to grow this thing to the west and potentially to the east. So, and to the north-south, really, it's open in all directions, and that's really part of the interest or part of the highlights. If we look at our drilling results in the context of a cross-section, which shows basically the cover against the granite. Now, we haven't superimposed the regolith profile on this, primarily because the diagram would be too noisy. But what you see is as we move to the west, which is as the direction of the drilling, you can see not only is the grade generally picking up, the grade is, the widths are also increasing, and the intersections are shallowing towards the surface. So if you recall what I expressed a moment ago, there is an upland area to our west. We would expect the profile to come up towards the surface, and that is exactly what we see. So somewhere further west, we hope this thing may be daylighting. We don't know. At the moment, we can't access that tenement, but we will at some point. If we move to this diagram, this is just trying to put the historical drilling into some context for you. The one thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the hole on the left is the original Manhattan hole. The hole on the right is one of our twin holes where we're just trying to confirm the results. As you can see, we do confirm the results. And in fact, the intersections that we are returned to us via our drilling are substantially wider than those received by Manhattan Corporation. Now, we drilled 2 twin holes. The results were pretty much identical in each, and it confirms that we can use the results in the historical drilling to guide us into further opportunities. And the diagram on the right is really just trying to show you that it's got both drilling programs combined. The yellow and green is the Manhattan drilling. The red is, of course, our drilling. Our results were sitting in really, the better results are sitting in the lower half of our drilling program, and they may be oriented east-west. We don't really know at this point in time because it's under-drilled. But if we look at the relationship to the anomalous partial rare earth oxide values, which are highlighted in green, you can see that really on the west flank, we've got another substantial target that probably lies to the north. So really that target window, as I've outlined, is just an area of interest to us because we are seeing this consistency of elevated rare earth results. We know that the bedrock is exposed in that area. We know that the weathering profile comes to the surface, and we are simply going to step out and chase those numbers into shallower landscape positions. And those landscape positions, we hope, in time will prove to be amenable to mining, open cut mining. Focusing more closely onto the results now, you can see the results of our trio. So this is for about 15 rare earth elements. It's not even the full 17. So again, we would expect to see an incremental increase in these numbers, but it's not going to really alter the story. The story is in the page, and that is, if you scan down our numbers, what you see is that we are very much on par with some high grade deposits that we know of around the world. And our numbers certainly seem at this point, and it is very early days, our numbers seem to be significantly improved, or significantly improve upon those of our competitors or our peers. So I think it's early days, very encouraging. Other good points about our geochemistry is that we really have negligible amounts of phosphorus, negligible uranium and thorium. So, the radio elements are really not key in this. We see that the deposit is weakly enriched in calcium and iron. The iron we're putting down to is as a regolith impact. The calcium we're also putting down to as a regolith impact in the data. And the calcium may be indicative of some clays being present. Our deposit, though, this particular style of mineralization, now I haven't discussed it as yet, I will, but we believe that we have what we call an ionic adsorption deposit. These deposits typically are enriched in heavy rare earth elements. Stallion appears to be different, and it is, I guess, one of the concerns that we have is that we are enriched in light rare earth elements. Now, it doesn't worry us so much from the point of view of key magnet metals, because if you have a look down the bottom here, we can see that NdPr, deuterium, tiberium, samarium, etc. We've got 30% of our total rare earth population is basically comprised of the highest value critical magnet metals. So that's a great position. Let's focus a little bit more on the NdPr. So if we look at that, coming back to the last point. So 90%, we're enriched in rare earth elements to the tune of around 90%. And primarily you can see that's made up of cerium, lanthanum, and NdPr, which is coming in at around 24%. Okay. If we look at NdPr directly, you can see again that we are coming in well above most of our peers. We are around 24%, and the average across our peer group is sitting at around 16. So we are substantially elevated, and that makes for a very interesting story going forward if it holds. A quick look at the price of NdPr. This is as of last Friday when I put this presentation together. 87,500 US, which equates to roughly in last Friday's dollar terms, $133,000 Aussie per tonne. So, there is substantial value in our deposit, or potentially in our deposit. So is it an ion absorption deposit? That is, I guess, the big question. Essentially, these styles of deposits form in altered granites. We do have an altered granite. We know we have an altered granite. And what is telling us that we have an altered granite really is the high thorium and uranium numbers that we see. Anything within, sorry, just bear with me. we have an altered granite. The high thorium and uranium numbers indicate that, and you get the weathering modification of that hot granite. And as the profile is formed, i.e. as the rocks break down and move from minerals to clay forms, which are more stable, we get constituents released into the weathering profile. And what you'll find is that the profile will form 4 layers, key layers, a soil zone, and then we have what we call the upper saprolite, which is a wholly weathered zone. We have a sub-weathered zone, which is generally just below the water table, which we call the lower saprolite. And then we move into fresh rock at depth. Okay, the rare earths that are released tend to get concentrated in the upper saprolite and in the lower saprolite. And this is where we are different to other players at this point in time. Most of our peers who are playing in the ionic space are working with deposits that are preserved or remnant in the leached upper saprolite. Our deposit overlaps with the base of, at this stage, and of course we are limited by drilling, it overlaps with the base of the leached upper saprolite and exists right through the lower saprolite. And so this diagram is just trying to show you essentially where we perceive ourselves sitting at this point in time. So a more conventional IAD, which is sitting associated with clay, and often they are referred to as IAC deposits, sits in the upper saprolite, the clay-rich upper saprolite. Stallion overlaps with that and really lies predominantly in the lower saprolite. So clays are forming here, but the clays tend to be, instead of kaolinite and halloysite, they tend to be smectites. Now, we're not sure at this point in time what the relationship is, but anyway, we will be determining that. So we shall move on. A quick look at some of the drill holes just to really try and get that point across. And that is that if we look at 2 holes, which I've just chosen at random, you can start to see this overlap that I'm talking about. The paleo channel is marked out to the first line. So the first white line that you can see on your diagram, we're then moving into the residual profile. So the upper part is the weathered clay-rich upper saprolite. And then we move down to the second line, and basically we are moving through the upper saprolite into the regional redox, which is sitting around the water table, and then into the lower saprolite. Where we're seeing the blue lines on top, those essentially are the intersections. So again, it's just really trying to confirm with you that parts of the deposit sit in the upper clay-rich zone, and that's typical of what we see of all of our peers. But most of our deposit is actually sitting a little bit further down in the weathering profile. But nonetheless, we are still in the weathering profile. So we are where the rocks are breaking down and materials, or the constituent elements, are being released into the local environment. So again, on this hole, you've got a much deeper cover sequence. Hit that white line. We move through an upper saprolite, which is where you're seeing all this color variation. Once the colors start to stabilize, and often there is a strong mustardy colored zone that you'll see in association with the interface or the transition in between the upper saprolite to the lower saprolite. That's the redox zone. That's where iron is overprinting. And what you'll get then afterwards, is you'll move into more stable color, which is typically green or khaki colored, and that is telling you that you are in the lower saprolite. Key thing here, iron is Fe2+, up here iron is Fe3+, and this is the reaction front where you're getting that conversion. Now, in terms of our geochemistry, what we are finding is that our numbers tend to be enriched in the upper part of the hole, and then they lessen as we move down the hole. So the enrichment is really occurring in the base of the upper saprolite, in the regional redox zone, and then just in the top part of the lower saprolite. That's where the key numbers are, and then they weaken as we go down the hole. Now, that's not always the case, but it is the case in the majority of the holes that we've drilled to date. So I hope that that's clear. So where are we going next, given that this is such an early stage program? Okay, well, our geochemistry already proves that the rare earths are leachable. Okay, so the analytical method that we chose, it was essentially a leach method. So we can leach these rare earths. So that's a positive. But we need to know, is that viable? Is it economically effective for us to leach using that digestion? And the chances are it's probably not. So we need to do some more work around that. And, you know, we've employed Gavin Beer, who from Metchem Consulting. Now, Gavin has been a consulting metallurgist for many years, and he spent the past 15 of a 34-year career basically dealing with these materials. So Gavin's on board and is our consultant, and we are working closely with Lab West to develop techniques where we can test the leachability of these rare earths. I make some other points there. Shallow resources, ideally you want effective wet chemistry. Shallow resources, well, as I've already pointed out, we believe that the further west we go, and we will find once we go to the east of Pond and Creek, the further east we go, the shallower this mineralization will be, and we will eventually see them come right up into the near surface environments. So once we've got that, the scale, of course, is already established that it's potentially huge, and then simple and inexpensive mining methods are available to us. So another key thing is that when these parameters are met, you can mine these things at very low grade. So typically up to 2,000 parts per million rare earth. And of course, we are sitting comfortably within that zone towards the probable 2,000 ppm rare earth level. And just to make the point clear to people, because I've seen in discussion that many are confused about these numbers and what they mean. And I really need to emphasize that an IAC IAD is a completely different style of mineralization to those of some of our peers, such as Lynas, Dreadnought, Hastings, and Kingfisher. All of these guys are chasing bedrock-related mineralization. So are we, but we are dealing with a weathering profile overprint on that bedrock. They are chasing the bedrock itself. Okay, it may or may not have a weathering overprint, but it is a different style of mineralization, and therefore we are in a different economic framework to what they are operating. So you can't compare them. It's apples and oranges. You want apples with apples, so that means clay hosted. And if you're looking at clay hosted, low grade mineralization, then that is the game that we are playing, and it's very different to everyone else. So part of Gavin's job is to basically direct us on some alternative solvents to see what works best. And really a key point to make here is that what works in one part of the deposit may not work in others. So it's not one test solution fits all. We're going to have to do more work in order to establish what operates best in different parts of the deposit, if indeed we have a deposit. So really the next thing for us is to move out onto a second phase of drilling, which we're primarily drilling to the south and infilling the existing mineralized zone to really see what we have. And if we feel geologically confident, then we will be looking to build our maiden resource. Moving very quickly on to Phillips River. Phillips River, we have a crew down there at the moment. Recently, we flew some high resolution magnetics. The contrast in the magnetics is shown here on the right, where you can see the original data that we were dealing with, 400 meter line spacing. And then on the right is our 50 meter line spacing. Obviously, the higher resolution means that we can start to see a lot more features of interest, such as this magnetic signal in the south. We've got I guess, a demagnetized zone here in the north, where you can see the overlying magnetic bars, which are probably Proterozoic dikes, are bending around, whatever this intrusive may be. There's some more greenstone being defined out through this position in the southwest corner. So there's another band of the Annabelle volcanics. And we've also managed to pick up some other units to the northeast in here, which we believe are probably pegmatite related. So the picture that we are developing is very different to that as mapped by the GL survey, which we see on the left-hand side. The map on the left shows our relationship to Mount Catlin in the north and to BNR's discovery at Phillips South, where they're getting numerous results which are sort of above 1% lithium dioxide. So team in the field right now who are basically validating all of these features of interest. The next thing that I want to focus on is antimony. I'll try to be very quick because time is dragging. The key thing about antimony is the change of use that will come with the development of the Ambri battery. The key differences are all documented there. I guess the principal thing is that it's 1/3 of the cost of a lithium battery to produce and sell. It's much safer than the lithium battery, and it suffers none of the impacts that affect a lithium battery. And therefore, to us, it's a better battery. The issue with the battery at the moment is simply scale. Now, this battery is designed to operate at a grid level. It's designed to become essentially a power station in itself, and it's modular. So as your power need grows, it can grow with you, and it stabilizes the grid. So it takes green energy forms such as solar and wind, it stores that charge, and then it effectively feeds that charge into the grid. At the moment, through green energy, we get spikes in grid as this energy flow fluctuates, which it must fluctuate because the wind's not always present, the sun is not always present because of cloud cover. So it causes havoc in the grid, and it really causes costs to go up. This battery takes that issue out because you feed it in the energy that you capture into the battery, you store it, and then you feed that into the grid. So you can modify your grid to basically work off average load rather than peak load, and you don't have to concern yourself about trying to modulate the power all the time to counter the lack of precision in the feed coming into the system. So it's a huge development for us. These batteries last for 20 years, and there's just no issues, hopefully, with this battery longer term. So it's the change of use case which is going to drive the antimony price going forward. We are very firm believers in that market, and we have developed a series, or we're pulling together some projects on the basis of that antimony's yet to see its day in the sun, but it is coming. And those principal projects at this point in time are Windfall and Magwood, which are both in the southern end of the New England fold belt. We have Hillgrove over here to the west, which is a gold antimony mine, which is currently on the market. Our projects are basically centered around that, chasing the same style of mineralization. Antimony has been out of favor for a long time, so we obviously are just getting started on the ground, collating the historical information. We've got the Munga Creek area here. This is the southern part of it, so we're down in this neck of the woods. We've got a series of historical mines. Currently, we have access to most of these areas. And the area that we started on was Munga Creek itself, which was last mined in 1974. And these are just some of the rock chips that you can see. So there's antimony mineralization or stibnite mineralization in a breccia in the top photo. And this is just a close-up of the antimony mineralization that elsewhere in the ground. The black is just the oxide that forms from the weathering of the antimony. So we're on the ground there, we're doing some work. We're about to step out, start working on Pinnacles and Taruka, doing exactly the same exercise as what we've completed here. And then we're advancing this one potentially towards drilling. Magwood is a new tenement, and our focus primarily is on Magwood itself, the old antimony mine. 4,000 tonnes of antimony concentrates were produced here up until such a time as Hillgrove was developed in the 1970s, so 1971, I think. Transfer went from Magwood to Hillgrove. And so we've just starting here with obtaining land access, and then we will again start with the same process, surface exploration, build up the picture, look at where we want to drill, and then progress towards drilling. So I think that one thing that we can say is that we have a lot of indicative news flow coming. We know and appreciate that our shareholders need to be informed of what's going on. And so there is plenty of work programs coming forward, which we will keep the market informed of. And I think lastly, just the investment opportunity. What is it? Well, we've got strategic battery minerals in solid locations. We've got a share price which is leveraged to early exploration success. So, if things go well for us at Stallion, it would anticipate a substantial re-rating on that basis. We've got numerous targets to explore, such as Windfall and Magwood for the antimony. We've got regular news flow, as you've just seen. And we're also constantly reviewing other opportunities to build the portfolio and strengthen the portfolio for the benefit of the shareholders. There's the board. And really, that's it. So I'd just like to thank you, and I hope that that made sense, and I'm certainly very open to any questions you may have.
Thanks, Jonathan. A great presentation, and clearly looking ahead to where you think certain commodities are going to be of interest in the future, and pinning some hopes on those, particularly with the latter projects you talked about. Now, just in terms, we do have a number of questions, and to remind everyone, if you do have a question you'd like me to put to Jonathan, use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, write the question down, and we will get that through. But we do have a number that have come through already. So just kicking it off, in terms of Stallion, what drew you to Stallion, and what was the idea that you were trying to unlock or determine when you looked at that project, given the amount of data that was available to you?
Yeah, it was actually Roland Gotthard who identified the opportunity there for a group that we're affiliated with. And he recognised the rare earth potential and convinced them of the merit. And then they essentially introduced me to the project to see what I thought. And I agreed with Roland, and we decided then to take that asset forward. Initially, what drew us was not just the rare earth, the fact that there was a uranium deposit there, which obviously in WA we have a one mine policy, and there's really no chance of anything else going forward at this point. So we thought that having that uranium there, we do anticipate a change in the uranium market as well, or perception towards uranium at some stage. And so we thought, well, having that there as a backup story allows us that freedom to really investigate these rare earths and see what we get. And but the numbers were significant for the 4 elements that they analysed. The numbers were significant and definitely warranted, follow up. And we just wanted to get in there and do it. So that's what got us in there, David.
And in terms of, you touched on the adjacent tenement that you want to get in and have a crack at, but haven't been able to access that tenement currently. What's the plan to get on the ground in that tenement?
Oh, look, we're just going through the access process, and once we have that resolved, which is just a matter of signing agreements, really, And once we've got those agreements signed, we'll be in there and we'll be doing our work.
And sort of stepping back to the drilling program that's underway, what was the goal when you went in there? What were you hoping? You had all this desktop data. What were you hoping to achieve from the drilling program?
Well, really, it was just those key things. We wanted to come to an understanding of what was happening on the flanks of the paleo channel. So, because we could see that the mineralization was sitting beneath the paleo channel. So the work of so let me just step back. Manhattan were chasing a what are they called now? A deep yellow style target, which is essentially uranium mineralization within lignite in the paleo channel. Now, when they were drilling, they had a scintillometer and they were just testing the holes, and wherever they got a kick in uranium, i.e. the Geiger counter basically, or the scintillometer started going beep, 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 they took a sample. They analyzed that sample for just the 4 rare earths. And we just simply pulled, or Roland initially pulled those 4 rare earths out, and he just did a quick calculation on them. He showed that the numbers were significant even for those 4. And then we just wanted to follow it up. We recognized that it was in the granite underneath rather than in the paleo channel itself. But even if it were in the paleo channel, that would be the key thing that's controlling the mobility of these rare elements and their redistribution in the profile is the acid front that I was talking about. So where you see this iron oxide buildup occurring, you are generating acid. That acid is what's breaking down the minerals and mobilizing all the rare earths. So they go into the water table, they then move in the groundwater. So they're following wherever the groundwater is moving, the rare earths are moving. So we basically would have, no matter what, would have stepped out onto the margins of the channel to chase those numbers to higher levels. And that's really what we wanted to test. And we've successfully done that.
And what's the plan here? So once the stage 2 drilling is completed at Stallion, what's the next workflow that investors should be focused on?
Well, we've started the MET test work already. So that process is underway. We've taken the view that we need to come at it with a commercially viable leach rather than starting at the top end with really strong acids and working back. We've actually started at the bottom, and we're trying to work with what is the most commercially viable leaches to see how they work. And if they work, fantastic. And if they don't work, well, then we'll start incrementally changing the nature of the leach and seeing where we get to before we can start to recover the rare earths. And then we need to obviously look at the economics of that. Is it viable? Isn't it? Or isn't it? So that's part 1 of the program. And part 2 really is to, the drilling at this stage is on very broad spacing. We need to infill that drilling grid to get a better feel for the distribution and the potential scale. So that's really phase 2. So drilling will probably happen before we know the results of the leach or some of the initial leach work. Maybe not, but really those are the 2 critical steps that people need to look for.
Is the reason you're doing the MET work now, are you already thinking about if we have a project and the drilling stacks up and the results continue, how are we going to extract it?
One of the key drivers of this style of mineralization is the fact that you need to have low costs. So you need to have, cheap leaches. It needs to be able to leach under atmospheric conditions. The leach may need to be dynamic or it may need to be static, but primarily it's going to be a leach which is in the field, open to the atmosphere. So you need leaches that can operate under those conditions to recover the rare earths. And you want to prove that as quickly as possible because you don't want to go out there and waste, millions of dollars drilling something that basically has no chance of development. So we're trying to answer that question up front and as quickly as possible before we go too far down the road with drilling. But we do still need to do more drilling. So that's really where we're at right now. We'll do these next 2 steps. We'll see where we're at, and then and we'll know how much more time and effort we're going to put into Stallion thereafter.
It's a unique approach, because generally what you see in exploration, and you're more of an expert certainly than I am, but generally people think more about building a resource and the size of the resource and then move into an extraction phase, where you've sort of taken that view early of we need to make sure we can extract it before we go and spend a lot of money on development and drilling activities.
Yeah, the big thing about it, as I said earlier, David, is just that this thing, because the actual grade of an IAD is very low, 2000 ppm really doesn't cut it unless the material recovers readily and cheaply. And so we need to show that. Otherwise, we could just spend a fortune out here drilling this thing out, because it does have that scale potential to be huge. So we don't want to do that until we're absolutely certain that there is a possibility for us to take this thing forward.
And in terms of funding, are you well funded through this next program?
We certainly are for the next program. We've got plenty of cash reserves at this point in time. And so, in fact, we can probably progress several drilling campaigns out there. The biggest issue for us is space. At this stage, we're focused on the west flank of the Ponton Creek. And in the available tenement, we really are running out of space. So the next drilling campaign will really I guess, define the limit of drilling that we need to do there at this point. And we need the adjacent tenement granted to continue to step out into that tenement. So plenty of money at the moment for the current position, for the current drilling program. We need, things may change going forward depending on the results of the leach work.
And do you have a wider view on the rare earth market itself? Obviously, it's gone gangbusters in recent times, but do you think it's going to stabilise? Do you think certain rare earths in the basket will rise above others? Do you have a wider view on the market itself?
Yeah, look, I think that technologies are always changing, and the uses of the rare earths are changing with it. And what we see, if we look at NdPr, and I'll focus on that because we believe, and the market is anticipating, that there is going to be a deficit coming. It's already priced very favorably, and there is a forecast deficit. And from that point of view, we would see an increase in demand as these technologies come online, as these engines, because primarily the NdPr is used in engines, in motors. So the motors in our electric vehicles and the motors in our wind turbines, for example. As we move to this green economy, we're going to see increasing demand on, say, things like NdPr. So with a deficit coming, we think that there's going to be price sustainability and perhaps improvement longer term. And, we just want to be there to feed that market if we can.
Jonathan, a great presentation. There still is a few questions coming through, but I think we might wrap it up and let you answer those questions directly with the people who've asked them at the appropriate time. Thanks everybody for participating in today's webinar. An exciting company, strong news flow, clearly leveraged to exploration success. So a company at the very least that you should be putting on your watch list to keep an eye on. Jonathan, thanks for a great presentation. We look forward to following with interest the company and its plans moving forward.
Very good. Thank you, David. Thanks for the time.